So just to reiterate, when it's packaging macromolecules to be carried or transferred somewhere else, the organelle that does that is the Golgi apparatus. It's the second one down on the left-hand side. Up in the top right, we have our nucleus. Whoops, I spelled that wrong. So the second one from the bottom, that's the sac inside a cell that acts as a storage area, is your vacuole.
Your central vacuole?
Yeah, it doesn't have this.
So over here, the semi-solid gel-like fluid that fills the cell, if we follow that arrow up, it's just pointing to any of the space. And really, that could be anywhere. Anywhere where you see just space between organelles. That's your what, Wes?
Cytoplasm.
Cytoplasm. Jordan.
Right under the cytoplasm is where the chloroplast is.
Okay, good. So the site of photosynthesis, where transfer from solar energy to chemical energy occurs, that's pointing to the chloroplast. There's multiple of them drawn on here, but that is a chloroplast. Regulates what enters and leaves the cell, and is pointing to this lining right inside the cell wall is actually going to be your plasma membrane. I'm just going to put the plasma M because it's the plasma membrane. What you're talking about is the lining around the actual vacuole. So that lining itself is going to be your tonoplast. I'm going to go ahead and go through these top down. So the functions that vary depending on the location, where it says primary role is hormone production. That's your smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So I'm going to call it the smooth ER. Endoplasmic reticulum is often abbreviated as the ER. So again, at the very top, smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Part of the cytoskeleton that provides a framework for structure and support. That's going to be the microtubules, or cytoskeleton microtubules. The next one down that's also part of the cytoskeleton is going to be the intermediate filament. Intermediate filaments are the little guys that act like the roadways within a cell. Remember the video we watched yesterday with that guy that was kind of walking along the tightrope? That little rope that he was walking along is the intermediate filament. The other part of the cytoskeleton, next one down, structural support that helps maintain or helps resist cell from being pulled, is called an actin filament. And you'll hear a lot about actin filaments, especially when we talk about muscles. Actin and myosin, very important little features. So looking at the side of the screen over here, we have one more left to talk about. It says, have enzymes which break down harmful toxins and build up within the cell, or that build up within the cell. This is pointing to a peroxisome. Some of you wanted to call it the rough ER, so let's clarify a little bit. The area around the nucleus, we talked about this the other day, that this purplish drawn area, which in cells, FYI, none of the cells are actually like colored this way. This is just a graphic representation of a cell. But this purple area is the nucleus, and around the nucleus we have the endoplasmic reticulum. A portion of that, and if you look very closely you'll see this, a portion of that does not have dots on it. So if you look up here where it says smooth ER, that section that it's pointing to, there's no little dots on it, no little purple dots. However, if you look over here onto this side of the endoplasmic reticulum, you're going to see all these little dots. So look at your diagram really closely. Do you guys see those dots? All of those little dots are actually pointing to ribosomes. So it's these small grain-like structures They're in the cytoplasm, but they're also found on the rough endoplasmic reticulum. So these are called ribosomes. And they're found on the rough endoplasmic reticulum, so the rough ER. And the reason I'm pointing those out together is because some of you were trying to say, that this is part of the endoplasmic reticulum down here. Nope, the whole area around the nucleus is the endoplasmic reticulum. Part of it's smooth because it does not have ribosomes on it, and part of it's rough because it does have ribosomes. So it's kind of like those nerd candy ropes. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like that. You have a portion of your endoplasmic reticulum that's just smooth. It's like taffy, right? With no nerds on it. And then the other half has all these little beady ribosomes on it, kind of like the nerd's rope. Staying on the idea of ribosomes, your ribosomes are actually going to be produced right here on the inside of the nucleus, and we call that part the nucleolus. So it's the very center region of a nucleus. So nucleolus. So it would make sense that your ribosomes are produced right here in the very center part of the nucleus, and then when they're produced, they come outside and they start sticking to this rough endoplasmic reticulum. But keep in mind, we have ribosomes all over the cell. We call them free ribosomes. So we'll talk about why we have them all over and what they're doing out in those other locations. In order for the ribosomes to actually escape from the nucleus, it has to escape through an opening. Okay? So that's where we have a nuclear pore come into play. And the nuclear pore are these little small openings on the surface of your nucleus, and it allows some stuff to come in and some stuff to come out. Not just ribosomes, but this is actually where you'll see RNA coming into the nucleus and out of the nucleus. So that is something that when we go back to that inner cell video that I'm going to reiterate with you guys, because it is something that is part of this mobile piece of the cell and the fact that this cell is a functional thing. So we have a nuclear pore. Now, one of the main pieces or main organelles is this little guy here that says it provides all the energy the cell needs to function. Extremely important. If we didn't have energy within our cells or within our bodies, we wouldn't be living. So this is such an important organelle for you to know. When we talk about where energy is produced within the cell, it's produced from an organelle called the mitochondria. And the last organelle that we have on here that's important to point out are all these little openings that are on the cell wall. So if you look around the edges, you'll see these little openings, and we call those openings plasmodesmatas. So it's kind of a little bit of a technical term, but if you think about it in the terms of the plasma membrane is located right inside the cell wall. Remember all those little beady moving things on the video? The plasmodesmata allows things to actually have an opening. So it would be like a doorway in our classroom, okay? And then maybe we have somebody in front of that doorway, somebody tough like Skylar, who stands there and says, who can enter or who can exit? Your plasma membrane is that tough person saying, yep, you can go in, you can't. You can go in, you can't. But the opening itself, where the doorway that you walk through, is that plasmodesmata. And as you guys are gluing that down, there's a couple things that I just want to point out. There are some organelles that have other names. So, for example, you might see on a website, your plasma membrane is sometimes referred to as a cell membrane. That's the same thing as a plasma membrane. Okay, so this could be called a cell membrane, but it's going to be referring to the same thing. Now, if you see cell wall, is the cell wall the same thing as a cell membrane? No, they're two different layers, and plant cells have both of those layers. So there's a couple things on a plant cell that we do not have on an animal cell. So either putting a star next to them Indicate them in some way. You can write this on your diagram. You can create a list. You can circle them. You can color the tab. Whatever you feel would help you understand it the best. I want you to indicate that these following items are not necessarily found, not necessarily. They are not found in animal cells. First one is a cell wall. Animal cells just do not have a cell wall, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason our plant cells have it, and there's a reason our animal cells do not have it. We will get into that. So if an animal cell does not have a cell wall, then it would make sense that they do not have plasmodesmatas either. So a plant cell would have a cell wall and a plasmodesmata, however, it does not have, the animal cell does not have those. Another one, you'll see often a lot of talk about these vacuoles, so this big space in the middle of a plant cell. Animal cells have them. They're not necessarily in every single animal cell. You're going to find websites that tell you that they don't have them, but that's not actually 100% true. So maybe that's something you want to indicate. Maybe you put a star next to it and write down some animal cells have it or few animal cells have it. But I would indicate somewhere something about this vacuole. Maybe few found in animal cells. Another important thing to keep in mind is that there's few found in animal cells and they're a lot smaller. Okay, and again, there's reasons behind this. We will get into some of those details. But they're not the big central part. Okay? The really obvious one that plants have, that animal cells do not have, is this chloroplast. So you should for sure have the chloroplast, the cell wall, the plasmodesmata circled. They are found in plant cells. They are not found in animal cells. And then something that indicates that this vacuole is larger and found in plant cells and found in a few of the animal cells. Based on the time that we have left, we're going to kind of bust through the animal cell a little bit faster, but using some of the same principles that we talked about with the plant cell. Okay, so let's take a look at starting in the center. We talked about on the other diagram how the very center organelle is the nucleus. It's no different here. We have the nucleus. Always remember, that is the brain. That is the control center. It's probably the most important part if you think about the fact that you need this nucleus in order for other functions within the cell to be performed. And then surrounding the nucleus, we have these membranes that are all folded up. On this side, we see the membrane without any little dots on it, so that is an indication to us that it's the smooth ER, or endoplasmic reticulum, so smooth endoplasmic reticulum. And then the portion that we see the little dots, aka the ribosomes all over, would be the rough ER. Rough endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, and as mentioned, then we have all of these little red dots as they're depicted here all over that endoplasmic reticulum and free, so there's some free floating out here. Those are the ribosomes. So switching sides of the diagram for you. But remember that those ribosomes are going to be produced inside the nucleus. So does the animal cell have nuclear pores? No. Yes, it does. And if you need to add that to that space, then add it. Because it does have it. It's just not something that I chose to include on your diagram for simplicity, to make it more simplistic. So these little pores would still be nuclear pores. Just as this center region, the middle of the nucleus, is the what? Nucleolus. Good. If you cannot remember that it still has those organelles, please add it to that blank spot that you have there. If you're pretty comfortable with knowing that there's all of this, these different compartments or different special areas within the nucleus or on the nucleus, then that's fine. You can look at your plant cell diagram to help you identify those and to talk about the functions. Moving downward on the right-hand side here, you're going to see this little structure. Number one, it's really important for you to know that's not on every single animal cell. Okay, but that structure is called a flagellum. And you see that on the function part, I put a note there that says not on all cells. So it's on some, it's not on all. It is absolutely not on plant cells. So it might be one of them you want to circle and say only animal cells. Plant cells do not have flagellum. They do not have what's called cilia. There's no cilia drawn on this diagram. If you wanted to add it, it would be like these little hair-like projections on the outside of a cell. And we see them a lot, especially on bacteria. But that would be called a cilia. Below the flagellum, we have this purplish looking thing. That is a lysosome. This little guy is kind of glowing. It's yellow. Is what we call a centriole. The centriole is so important for cell division. And remember, things do not grow or develop without cellular division. So this centriole is something that we're going to be talking about in depth over another unit. Right below the centriole, we're going to see this little guy. Right here, this blue ball. Okay, that is the peroxisome. And this is what converts some of the more harmful toxins. This is what breaks down some of the more harmful toxins or more harmful materials within a cell into things that are less harmful. So when you talked last year in physical science about molecules and compounds and how things can be broken apart and maybe made into new substances, the peroxisome is really, really important for that. Then we get into some of the parts of what is called the cytoskeleton. So one thing I would like you guys to underline is in your functions, it says cytoskeleton, cytoskeleton, cytoskeleton. All three of these organelles are part of the cytoskeleton. So on my diagram, I have a little bracket and I write cytoskeleton. The first one is going to be the intermediate filament. The next one is the microtubule. And then the bottom one is the microfilament. Now notice that the microfilament and microtubule have the same function. It says part of the cytoskeleton, structural support that helps resist the cell from being pulled apart. So it's tension bearing. We had one thing in the plant cell that was conducting that role. But we also have a cell wall in a plant cell. And this is really important for you guys to hear right now. That cell wall is important for providing structure and the tension bearing parts in a plant cell. But an animal cell doesn't have that. So it needs extra support from its cytoskeleton to keep the cell from deflating. How many of you have seen a water balloon? Okay. When we fill up a water balloon, it's full of water. But if I poke it, will it bend? Nope, it's just rock hard like the table. It bends, right? And if I poke it too hard, what happens? It pops. Okay? Cells are no different. They need to have some support. And at some point, they may not have enough. The last, on the right-hand side here, the last organelles, this is no different than the plant cell. We have the Golgi apparatus. Really important for packaging things. I'm going to run out of room there. But Golgi apparatus. The membrane, this blue, all the way on the outside of the cell. So it's kind of like the edges of the water balloon. That's our plasma membrane. What's another word for a plasma membrane? A cell membrane, good. And then the last one, the really important energy source. What's our energy source? Mitochondria. So make sure you have all of your labels stuck down on your diagram. And always, if you need to go back and review, you can.